I've been seeing posts like these come up recently. And at first glance, you may think to yourself, well, it's just trying to keep people safe, or in other cases, people would say something like, oh, why are you concerned about something like this being done, or you damn gooner or something like that. Honestly, I really like the fact that the word goon or gooner or gooning is now synonymous with things like well, I think anyone who's been browsing the internet over the past months can probably come to the quick conclusion of what gooning means, especially when I get to what this video is about, or if you just look at the title of this video. But what does worry me, as someone who has mentioned before this particular kind of topic, and also the topic of freedom per se, it does worry me that the world is taking a very strange infatuation with wanting to ban access to 18 plus content. I don't know why this is a big deal for a lot of people all of a sudden. Like, and I always hear the tired excuse every single time of, well, we gotta think about the children. The children this, the children that, the children are our future. The children are important. We must protect our children at all costs and blah, 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 the children. At this point, when you always hear about the children, it's like hearing about thoughts and prayers anytime like a mass shooting or something happens here in the United States. Like, it's just one of those things where it just goes in one ear and it comes out the other ear. Like, it's just the most hollow sounding shit you've ever heard when someone says, oh, like, my thoughts and prayers with the victim of this recent mass shooting that's happened in some random part of the United States. My thoughts and prayers to the victims. My thoughts and prayers. Like, thoughts and prayers don't do shit. Like, it's kind of like that. Whenever someone wants to ban 18 plus content and their next mindset is the children. We must do this for the children. It's all about the children, folks. No, nothing else matters. This is all about protecting children. It's hilarious because, especially in the context of here in the United States, I really love how our elected officials care so much about the children, but don't seem to mind the concept of cutting funding for school lunches, or just cutting funding to education in general for the children. Definitely, they're so worried about the children. You can really tell. No, let's be honest here. The whole reason why countries like the United Kingdom have implemented recent, very brain-dead laws saying, well, you need to have ID to verify browsing the hub or browsing the 34. Browsing things like these. You need to have any sort of adult content you come across on the internet, you gotta verify your identity. Bruh, it's adult content. Like, why on earth do I need to verify my identity to look at some titty on the internet? Like this is just absurd. Now somebody would say, well, why are you so concerned about having to show your ID if you want to goon off or something? Well, the main concern is not, I'm just trying to have a quick rub out or something. No, my main concern is your privacy. If you told me that you have to show an ID to buy alcohol in person, or to buy, adult content in person, or to buy, anything that's considered adult materials, whether it's, adult content or alcohol or drugs or something like that, you need to show an ID when you're buying these things in person. And when it comes to buying these types of things, if you're getting something delivered to you, or you're trying to sign up for something that's some kind of adult service or something like that, well, yeah, you need to have some kind of an ID for that. But in the case of just simply going on the hub, for example, or going on, a Rule 34 content site, all of these websites, they're always going to ask you at the beginning, are you 18? You simply answer, yes or no. Now, obviously, we know, we're not retarded. We know very well that anyone who's under 18 could easily just answer, yes, I am 18. I sure as hell am 18. But we're aware of this. Now, people would come to the conclusion, why are you against putting ID restrictions, on who can access by requiring ID? Because let's be honest here, folks. Do you really trust the hub with your private information? This isn't a bank. You're not trying to take out a loan. You're not trying to sign up for medical services or healthcare. You're not applying to a job. The only time I should ever be giving the Hub my private information is if I'm looking to become a cameraman for the Hub, because that is technically a job I can do. I don't want to do it, but it's a job I can do. I could be a cameraman for the Hub. I don't want to. But that's probably the only time you should be giving an organization like that your private info. And the Hub agrees with us. The Hub doesn't want your information because the Hub knows quite well, how are they supposed to safeguard your private information? If they ask for your ID or a picture of your face, and I think we've all heard the recent news story about that T app, the app where there was a bunch of women who went onto this app. It was basically an app where they could essentially talk about, like they could basically just review the random men that they find on sites like Tinder or Bumble or Hinge, and then write their opinions on them, and then other ladies can chime in, and it's basically like an Angie's List or a Yelp for dating, mainly specifically women's opinions of the men that they found on these sites, which in a sense I get that, because for safety reasons, if a woman dates some guy that they met online and he ends up being like an actual dirtbag or something like that, like, yeah, I can understand that. But at the end, a site like this did just basically become a site to dox a bunch of men that they didn't like because either he was a cheap ass, or he didn't do this at the end of the date, or he just simply or he didn't do this thing that I liked or something, but nothing like actual scummy or anything like that. It turned into that, and well, the problem is at the end what happened is that the T apps info, whenever you go to use one of these apps, they're gonna ask for some kind of ID, some kind of identification. Usually either you show a picture of yourself, some people sent pictures of their IDs, some people sent pictures of a work ID, and some people, took pictures of themselves because it would ask for like a selfie and it would send it to a central server. And, well, they would say, well, we store these pictures from what I've seen of screenshots from the app. It would say, well, we'll take your image and remove it entirely after we verified you are a woman, which that didn't seem to have been the case, because there were some men whose images were found in the leaks. So clearly somebody there wasn't doing their job, and clearly somebody at the developers for the T app was definitely not doing their job when the images were all still saved onto a large server that got leaked. So think of that for a moment, and now think about the Hub. Now I know the Hub makes a shit ton of money. It's it's probably the most it's not probably, it is the most visited adult content site in the world. So they have a huge web traffic, and they have a huge revenue stream. So they do have the money for some kind of infrastructure like this, but again, anything can happen. A hacker group, there's been hacker groups that have hacked into government-run websites or organizations or things like that. So if hackers could take over things like this, what makes you so comfortable giving your information to a site like the Hub, and then, the Hub, God forbid, gets hacked, and all that private info gets leaked to the world? Now, guess what? Random Joe Schmoes and God knows where in the world are going to have their info leaked out. It's like, oh, so-and-so, jerks off to this video, or so-and-so jerks off to hentai or something like that. It's something that, well, it's one of those like open secrets of reality. Everyone knows that your average man definitely wanks to something, but we just don't want to actually, have conversations with everyone. It's like, yes, sir, is this the type of, adult content you consume? I do say I'm more of a connoisseur of this kind of content. No, it's not a content that you like to have out in public, in the open with other people. So, do you really trust a company like this with your private info? And apparently, governments like that of the United Kingdom don't seem to give two shits about that. And apparently, parts of the EU don't seem to be giving a shit about that either. They're just like, oh, you gotta provide ID if you want to access these websites. We're doing this to protect the children. Don't you dare be against this, because that means you're in favor of pretty messed up things and all that. It's like, no. Here's the deal. Of course you don't want to have children browsing these kinds of sites. It's pretty obvious. It's like basically saying, oh, do you support good things and are you against bad things? Well, no shit, Sherlock. I'm not retarded. I'm in favor of good things against bad things. Obviously you don't want to have a 10-year-old getting access to the Hub. But the problem is that if you have a website that is catering to adults should be able to access the website whenever they can. If you want to make an account on these websites, that's all up to you. And if you're a parent and your concern is that, like, well, my child was given an iPad and now all of a sudden they have a much higher access to the hub. Okay. Tech these days has parental controls. These are not really new inventions. It's like whenever someone complains about, oh, like, I like, it's when someone complains about someone who's had way too many kids and they haven't used contraceptives, and then you have to explain to them there's this neat little invention called a condom. You know, it's been around for quite some time. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Well, in the case of protecting your children from adult content, you know, there's these nice little things called parental controls or parental locks, or back in the day they were called V-chips. You know, you could easily just set one of these up. You know, it's not really hard to do even. You could simply put a specific line in the web browser on an iPad that you give to little Timmy or little Susie that states blacklist this website. You know, and anytime, you know, they happen to stumble upon anything from one of these websites, boom, like they can't access it. Well, you could do it with your own Wi-Fi. You could block access to one of these websites and ask for a passcode any single time you want to go on to them. That's how a V-chip worked back in the day. If you don't want to have your children consuming mature content, you would block access to it as a parent should, you know, as a responsible parent is supposed to do. And if you, the adult, goes onto one of these websites or tries to access one of these TV channels back in the day, it would ask for a code. You would enter that code in because only you, the parents, would know that code. You would enter that code in and boom, you would bypass the V-chip and be able to consume your spicy content. You know, as long as the kiddies didn't know the code, you were all set. You made sure to put the barriers in place, and you did your job as a parent to make sure that they were kept away from these kinds of things. So I find it pretty fucking lazy when some shit parents essentially start blaming the adult content sites or blaming the government. And look, I have my issues with the government. I think government has its uses and it has its ups and downs. One of the things you should definitely not be asking the government to do is police who can access what adult website on the internet by demanding IDs for shit. That's some Saudi Arabia, you know, Iran type bullshit. You know, that's the type of shit that you would expect like an authoritarian regime to implement. That's some like North Korea level shit. Like you're blocking access to content that you don't deem as safe. And again, what does the government think of as safe? You know, right now it's adult content. But what if the government says, well, I don't approve of people having access to, news sites or sites where they have freedom of information or things like that. You know, you're going to have to show ID. I need to verify who's wanting to read this specific news source or who wants to hear the opinions of so-and-so. I need to know who you are. I need to know where you're from. I got to know this kind of information. You don't have a right to know that information. If you go onto the internet, onto a website, you should have every right to go on whatever website you want. If you want to give your information to that website by signing up for an account, that's up to you. But you should have full access to be able to do whatever you want on the internet. Where you can go to is your business. It's not the government's fucking business to tell you what site you can and can't go to. And if all of this is for the sake of protecting the children, again, government has a simple answer to the parents. Stop being fucking lazy. You know, parent your damn kids. You know, put parental blocks. It's very simple. You know, it's not hard to do this. I hate that I have to repeat this over and over again. You know, but apparently some parents, and if you're a parent who's like my age, I'm 28 years old, and I know that there's parents who are my age. I know some parents who are even younger than me. You know, if you're a parent and you're concerned about your children, you know, having access to adult websites, you who are my age or younger than me know damn well what a parental lock is. And you know damn well how to set these things up. So don't give me that bullshit that's like, I need to have the government, you know, find a way to protect my children because I'm too lazy to do it myself. No, that's not how things work. That's not how things ever worked. You know, back in the day, if an adult wanted to go into a store that sells anything that's remotely adult, simply, are you an adult? Great, here's your thing. You know, they wouldn't be like, oh, we can't sell adult content in this area because, you know, there could be children who could wander into our adult store. Really? Like, if an adult store exists, They are open to, of course, adults. Anyone who's underage walks in, they'll kindly be told to turn around and go outside that door they came from. If you're an adult, as long as you can prove you're an adult going into one of these places, perfectly fine. But on the internet, if you're concerned, and the internet, given the openness that it's been for so damn long, people can go anywhere on the internet. But there are, of course, ways to restrict access to these sites in ways that the individual themselves can do it. The government isn't supposed to be in charge of telling you, here's where you can go, here's where you can't go, you need to show ID to do this or show ID to do that. When you let the actual internet itself police itself, it's perfectly fine. And when you as a parent are the one actually, taking charge of your own children and telling them like, hey, you can't go here. You don't really, in case of young children, you don't really want to tell them that such things exist. It's better to just simply block access to these kinds of sites. Now obviously if you have teenagers, like a 14 to 17-year-old, as someone who was 14 to 17 years old back in the day, obviously you're teenagers. It's one of those things where it's like, you don't want to, admit that it happens, but you know very well that your teenager has probably stumbled upon these sites and knows of their existence. It's one of those things that the average parent is like, you're aware there's a possibility that such a thing is happening, but you don't want to think about that. And you would best clear that out of your mind. Like if Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones appeared in front of you with their little metal thingies and just deleted your memories of any of that. But it's one of those like secrets that exists. It's one of those open secrets. It happens. You just don't want to. You just want to pretend like it doesn't happen. But when it comes to someone who's like a 10-year-old or something, like you as a parent, you got to make sure the V-chips are enabled. You got to keep them away from that. And it's not hard to do that. But you shouldn't be telling the government to police the entire internet. It's not the government's job to police the internet. Once you have the government involved in how internet, speech goes and freedom goes on the internet, then things start to get kind of slippery. It's that slippery slope of, I understand full-blown illegal content, like, illicit substances or, cheese pizza or things like these on the internet. Like, I fully understand the government, sending, law enforcement to patrol the internet to make sure nobody's trying to get these types of things. But when it comes to fully legal things like 18-plus content on a site like the Hub, that's not really the government's job to monitor that kind of thing. As long as all the content on the Hub is fully legal, Hub can operate without any issue. If you're worried about who's getting onto the Hub, just set some parental blocks. It's not hard to do that. It's not the Hub's job to police what your children have access to. It's not the government's job either. And the problem is, once you let the government in, the government doesn't want to just take an inch. They want to take a whole goddamn mile. That's my concern with all this. And it pisses me off how there's a lot of people who are obviously against this for freedom's sake. Someone who myself is in favor of, things like, free speech. I'm against the idea of censorship in any capacity. I absolutely detest laws like the ones that the UK has proposed, and laws like here in the United States, the federal government is looking to propose. I hope a bill like this gets fucking, destroyed before it even has any chance to breathe. But, knowing our modern government, I have zero faith, especially when it's bipartisan. I have very little faith. I can only hope for the free speech warriors to actually do something and prevent something like this from, taking place. Because, if you implement something like this here in the United States, I don't even want to imagine how the average American can react. Like, I shouldn't have to be giving you my private information just so I could look at some titties and some booty on the internet. It's my privacy. I do with my private time as I wish. If you're worried about somebody else's kids, stumbling upon some shit like that, again, block access to the websites. Let me say it again. Block access to the websites on your own. Don't ask for the government to do this. It's not the government's job, and it should never be their job to police the internet. Aside from, policing it for, actual illegal activity. But fully legal things, that's not their job. And again, you don't want to invite the government to police the internet for legal things. Because what does the government deem as unacceptable content? And that's where things start to get down the slippery slope. And, I don't want to envision something like that. Because that's some That's some concerning levels of government, interference and government spying. That's some like no, that's some great firewall types of internet monitoring by the government. And that's my biggest concern with all this. Anyone who cheers for the idea of introducing laws like these to police, who gets to access these kinds of sites, and your whole thing is like, oh, it makes sure that the gooners stop gooning. Well, let me just tell you right off the bat, one, you're retarded. If you feel the need to tell people what they can and can't do with if you feel the need as an adult to tell other adults what they can and can't do with their private lives, you can scoff at other adults for it, but you can't force them to do what you say. If you feel the need to do that, I have to kindly ask, go fuck yourself royally for some shit like that. But no, it's frankly quite terrifying. I don't like the idea of any of this. I really hope that that governments just realize how bad of an idea this is and turn around and just undo all this. Because I don't give a shit how many times you tell me it's to protect the children. It's to stop using children as a scapegoat for your shitty, overreaching policies. Stop using the children as a scapegoat. Like it's you just admit it. You want to police the internet, and not just the illegal parts of the internet. You want to police the normal internet, because frankly, I am aware that some governments are not too happy about some of the speech on the internet. Not because it's dangerous, but because it just doesn't fall in line with what the current administration has in their views. And that's, when you get to that point, then I gotta say, it's not, things are not, the canary in the coal mine is giving signs right now. That's worrying. If anyone's ever read the story of Shimonetta, I recommend it. It's a nice story. I've seen the anime. It's a very goofy anime with a goofy premise, but when you actually sit down and understand what the story is about, and then think about it in the context of modern day with what's been going on recently when it comes to adult content, I don't think Shimonetta was supposed to be a blueprint. I'm already concerned that Black Ops 2 is becoming a blueprint for modern, global relations, for geopolitics. Now I'm a little concerned that Shimonetta is becoming a blueprint for domestic politics. So let's hope we don't go in that path. And I honestly am. Maybe we were born in the wrong time period for someone who's like my age. Maybe I should have been born in the distant future, but we can't really control that. But seeing what society has devolved into these days, all for the sake of well, some people would argue protecting the children. Some people, in some cases, say, well, it's to protect women, which I'm like, in that case, well, the same thing was said about alcohol, long ago, and that didn't really seem to do anything. And those say, well, it prevents, bad behavior. Same thing was said about alcohol long ago here in the United States. And banning alcohol didn't really achieve anything. If anything, it just made crime a lot worse. It made people a lot worse. To the point where, the 18th Amendment had to be repealed. So, maybe we shouldn't ban things that are perfectly safe and normal. If you're banning humans from, it's a vice, don't get me wrong, but, as long it's a vice that only impacts you, the individual. If it's a vice that's a perfectly normal, perfectly legal vice, and it's only affecting you only, you should have every right to do with your own body as you please. Long ago, when people said you couldn't drink alcohol, well, that's bullshit. You should have a right to poison yourself with alcohol if you want. I mean, yours truly drinks. I know it's not healthy for me, but, I have a right to drink, put into my body what I want to put into it. Same thing with adult content. Nowadays, if you go on a site like the Hub or Rule 34 or something like that, You have a right to access these kinds of sites as an adult. It's an adult activity. You are not a child. And if your concern is like, oh, well, it's to protect, it's to protect this group of people or something, it's not going to do anything. If anything, it might make things worse for said groups of people. And in the case of, oh, well, we're trying to protect children, it's not going to protect children. You're not protecting children by making the lives of adults more miserable than it already is. There's a way to protect children in a way that doesn't involve getting the government involved. It's that simple. Anytime you get the government involved in banning something, shit always hits the fan. Always. Just don't. Just can we please go back to the 2000s when things made sense, at least in a lot of aspects? God damn. Anyways, I'd like to thank y'all for watching, and y'all have a wonderful time or day or whatever. Peace.